Barbara O'Shea from PROXUS.
And I am Bruce Marable from lifecycle. So a lot of people like talking about a lot of different things, but it just so happens that Barbara and I love talking about HR analytics. So that's what we're going to talk about here. So let's get started. So to make sure that you're in the right place and you actually signed up for the right webinar, what we are going to cover here are the things that we're actually going to talk about throughout the webinar. So if you're here to learn about how employees and customers are your business and how they link to HR metrics, why HR metrics and analytics are important, what are the different types of HR metrics, and how using HR metrics and analytics can help your organization, then you're in the right place. If these aren't the things that you want to learn about, then we don't want to waste your time and you can close out the webinar now. So let's get started. So we want to start off with a very bold statement, and that statement is that employees are customers of your business and the product you're selling them is their job. Now, a lot of you might be scratching your heads wondering, what are we talking about? Well, when you gave all of your employees the job at your company, you sold them on a product. You sold them on something that would help them empower their lives, something that they would enjoy, and something that would allow them to make a living. And that was a product. So the same way that you sell services and products from your company is the exact same way that you did that with your employees. So the big reveal, which we already talked about, is that employees and customers actually experience the same process. And what I'm going to do is try to make you a believer to understand that they actually do go through the same process. So let's start from here. What you see on the left and the right are the typical stages for the customer lifecycle and the employee lifecycle. So let's start on the customer side. On the customer side, the way that you manage your customers in your company, you probably created some type of strategic plan that allows you to figure out how you're going to get customers, how you're going to manage them, and make sure that they stay in your business. And typically, the stages within that strategic plan include your customer acquisition, how do you get your customers, your customer onboarding, how do you onboard your customers in your business, your customer training, how do you train your customers on the way that you operate your business, customer engagement, taking your customers out, making sure that they're happy, making sure that they have great relationships with everyone at your company, customer satisfaction, making sure that all your customers are satisfied, and customer retention, making sure that you're retaining as many customers as possible. But what we want to show you is that on the employee side, it's pretty much the same exact process. And as we go through these comparisons, we'll show you how you're really focusing on the customer side and how you can implement a lot of those tactics on the employee side. So as we see on the right, under the employee lifecycle, you have the same typical stages. You should be creating a strategic plan on how you're going to attract, train, and retain employees. You should have a plan around employee acquisition and recruitment. You should also have a plan around employee onboarding and orientation, training, engagement, satisfaction, and retention. Again, we know you're probably doing a lot of this on the customer side, but we want to show you exactly how you can do the same thing on the employee side. So just give us a couple minutes, and we're going to go through some of the comparisons on how you can implement what you're doing with your customers with how you could operate and manage your employees. So the first comparison we're going to talk about is your customer acquisition. We know you're pretty focused here. You probably have some type of strategic plan around how do you advertise and market to your customers, whether you're using free tactics like Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, maybe reaching a younger audience with Snapchat. Either way, you're probably using some type of online, offline, radio, TV ads to attract your customers. You're also probably figuring out how much you're actually paying to acquire those customers. So when's the last time somebody tried to sell you on advertising? You probably told them no. And the reason why you told them no is because you realized that the ROI wasn't there for the type of advertising that you were trying to sell you. So again, we know you're doing a lot of these things on the customer side in regards to advertising and making sure you're paying the right amount to attract your customers, and you're probably tracking those customers in some type of CRM as well so that you can see how many customers you have and where they are in the pipeline. Well, let's look to see if you're doing these same type of things with your employees. So on the talent acquisition side, the question that you should ask yourself now, and we want to pose for you and your organization, is, are you just as focused here? Are you just as focused as creating a strategic plan to advertise and market to prospective employees? Are you really creating a plan with your hiring managers to figure out if you should attract employees from LinkedIn or Simply Hired or Indeed? Are there strategic places that you can go online for your industry niche to figure out where you can get the employees that really want to work in your industry? Also, measuring acquisition costs. Are you doing the same thing on the employee side? There are a lot of costs associated with hiring, whether it's the paperwork or the online system or all the training and onboarding. Those should all be accounted for when you're trying to figure out how much you're going to spend in your acquisition process. And the third is tracking in the system. Again, you're probably tracking your customers in some type of CRM, but are you using some type of database like a recruitment software company or an applicant tracking system to manage how many employees you have coming in the pipeline for different positions and in different roles and what stages are they in? So next, we're going to go into another example around referrals. So to make the comparison, let's look at customer referrals. We know you're probably focused here. We know you're asking for referrals. Everyone does it. If you have a customer and they love your product or service, why wouldn't you say, do you know anybody else like you who also loves the product or service, and maybe you try to sell them? A lot of you are probably also incentivizing for referrals as well. Maybe you're giving a discount for a customer. Maybe you're telling them they get free training or support if they actually find you another customer like them. And you're probably, and I'm sure everyone on this call is exceeding the expectations of their customer and providing the most awesome service as possible. You're going above and beyond to make sure that every customer is raving and ranting about what you're doing for them. Every time they go to dinner or they're hanging out at a networking event with another company like them and they ask them about who are they using for their service, I'm sure you're providing service so amazing that they're telling all of their friends and family about you. But the question is, and again, we want to help you pose this question, are you just as focused on the employee side? Are you asking for referrals? Are you talking to the best employees that you have in your organization and asking them, do they know other people like them who are rock stars that also want to work in your business? Are you incentivizing for referrals? There are a lot of organizations that already have plans in place that you could imitate that would allow you to figure out whether you pay employees for referrals, or maybe you give them extra vacation days, or maybe there's a special prize or they get taken to dinner. Whatever it is, people like to be incentivized. And then also, are you exceeding the expectations of your employees? Remember, as we said in the beginning, you sold them a product, and that product was their job. So are you exceeding the service around that product? Are you making it so awesome that when they're talking to their friends and family who are looking for a job, or if any of their friends say, hey, I work at this crappy place, I hate it, I hate my boss, they can say, you know what, you should try to work where I work because it's absolutely amazing. So we hope that we're not beating a dead horse here, but we really want to get this point across about the exact parallel of how you could treat your employees the same way of your customers. So we're going to go again, and we also have another one after this. So let's look at engagement on the customer side. You're probably very focused on providing a lot of consistent updates and showing your customers all the new and exciting things that your company has to offer. You're also probably showing appreciation. Maybe you're taking them to basketball games. Maybe you're sending them thank you cards in the mail. And a lot of your sales teams or marketing teams, whoever's responsible for making sure that your customers are satisfied, are probably sending out surveys and forums and seeing why do people like your service and what could you do better. So again, I'm sure you know where I'm going now. Why are a lot of companies not as focused on the employee side? So let's ask, are you providing consistent updates to your employees? Are you making sure that they understand what's going on with the company? Are you showing appreciation? Are you making sure that you're going above and beyond to show that your employees are valued and that you wouldn't be able to do business without them? And are you also measuring satisfaction? Are you sending out forms? Are you using MailChimp? Are you using Excel? Something just to say, hey, do you like working here? And are you going to quit? And if so, why? And then the last example that we want to cover is churn. And we left this for last because losing customers is probably the last thing that anyone ever wants to do. And we know you're definitely focused here. So when we look at customer churn, you're probably looking at your churn rate. What's the percentage of customers that are leaving? You're probably tracking the churn type. Is it voluntary or involuntary? How many customers did you have to let go or break up with versus how many customers actually left you because there was a better product or service in the market, or they just didn't have any need for your company anymore? And lastly, you're probably asking every single customer when they left, why did you leave me? Why do you want to divorce us? We're not providing the same service for you? What can we do better? So the question is, are you doing the same thing on the employee side? Are you actually tracking your turnover rate? Are you looking to see how many employees are actually leaving your company? And if so, are you actually tracking to see how many left voluntarily versus involuntarily? How many did you have to fire versus how many left? And if so, and if a lot of people just left, then why did they leave? Did they leave because they didn't like their management? Did they leave because you weren't showing appreciation? Did they leave because it was just too far from home? Those are the things you want to learn about so that you can help future employees not go through the same process. And lastly, are you tracking the turnover reasons, and also measuring ROI to figure out, are you keeping the right employees? So to sum up this section, we really wanted to hone in, and we wanted to use a couple of key examples to really show you that specifically in the business sales and marketing space, a lot of individuals and departments have really worked hard to figure out how to manage all of these things in the customer lifecycle, so that you're attracting the best customers, you're managing the best customers in the most cost-efficient way, and you're keeping as many customers as possible. And a lot of the times, marketing and sales departments are really using data and metrics to understand all of these different areas. But on the employee side, we want to make sure that you understand that it's just as important to do the same thing, just as important to look at all these different functional areas of HR and treat them with the same respect and appreciation as you would on the sales and marketing side with your customers. So now we're going to turn it over to Barbara to go into the next section.
Thank you, Bruce. So now that we've established the connection between our customers and our employees, let's talk about some HR analytics and why they are so important. Why care about HR metrics? Well, because your employees are your most important asset, and understanding your workforce means understanding your business. HR metrics can help you understand and uncover hidden strengths, and just as importantly, hidden weaknesses in your workforce as well. Top performing companies have been analyzing metrics for years now, and they have realized the important connection between HR data and business outcomes. It is, quite frankly, the differentiator that is key to their success. And the challenge is for HR leaders to effectively be able to connect HR data to business outcomes, and not only do that, but communicate it in it with a purpose and clear intent to the leaders of the organization.
All right, so now it's really time to talk about, where do all these HR metrics come from? We've made you a believer to see the parallel between marketing and sales and the employee side. And you know why it's important, but if you really want to get started, where do you go to get these metrics? So I'm sure this box may look confusing, and for some of the people who understand what this means, you're probably laughing. And the reason why is because most of you in some functional area of HR are probably using some type of Excel or Google spreadsheet to manage a lot of your areas in HR. So that's why you see the big maybe if you're lucky, because here's a box that we wanted to share with you that has a lot of functional areas of HR and not all, but a lot of the different systems that represent those areas. So if you look in sourcing, you see LinkedIn, you see Elance, Career Builder, recruitment, you have Taleo and Namely, onboarding, etc. And for a lot of the attendees on this webinar, I also know that you're using the PROXUS iSolve software that also has a lot of these metrics as well. So just wanted to show that there are a lot of different places that you can get these metrics from, and just because you don't necessarily have a software system doesn't mean that you don't have a system, because a lot of people are actually using Excel and spreadsheets, and so if that's your system, then we'll show you actually how to leverage the metrics that come out of those as well.
Great, thank you. So what are the different types of metrics? Here you can see that I've classified them into 6 different categories: employee productivity and profitability, employee engagement and attendance, recruiting efficiency, compensation and benefits, and retention. Each of these classifications have several unique metrics, many actually, and as we discussed, the data needed to calculate these metrics most likely come from a variety of different sources within your organization. Determining what metrics to measure and report on will depend on your organization's strategy and goals. When high-level executives ask HR folks to start measuring a department's performance, or sometimes HR folks scramble to figure out what they should measure. Measurement just for measurement's sake is never a good idea. So as we all know, what gets measured gets managed, so it's really important to think through the connection to the business plan and carefully determine which metrics you're going to select. Once again, a good approach to that is focusing on the metrics that affect progress towards your business goals. Let's take a look into some specific metrics. Revenue per employee, for example, is a productivity measure. This measures how efficiently a company is utilizing its most important assets, its employees. Employee engagement, Bruce talked about this. This measures how connected your employees are to your culture, the mission, and the values of the organization. This is actually a very important metric, and if you're not doing something around this, we probably suggest this is one that you should pick, because I would imagine it would be aligned with your business goals. Attendance and absentee rate are very, very common. It's pretty self-explanatory, but when you actually track it and analyze it, it becomes much more meaningful. You can determine any type of correlation between your employee engagement. You can determine any abuse patterns. You can determine potential staffing issues before they happen, which can become very, very powerful. A few more we'll dive into. On the recruiting side, cost per hire. Pulling together costs associated with filling an open rec. These costs come from a variety of different places, and in 2016, the average cost for a mid-level, not highly technical position for each open rec for an organization was anywhere from $4,000 to $6,000. So, you know, you have that as an external benchmark, and you want to know what it's costing you internally. Cost per employee benefit is a comp and benefits metric. I would venture to say that your benefits costs are probably one of your top 5, if not top 3. Expenses within the organization, I'm sure your finance folks are tracking it, and your HR folks should be connecting it to your number of employees as well. There's lots of statistics around turnover and retention, but turnover costs are very important. You might know what your annual turnover is, but do you know what it is in comparison to other organizations, and do you know what that's actually costing you when somebody leaves your organization? So it's very important not only to use your internal data to calculate your HR metrics, but to also benchmark against external data sources. External data can range anywhere from free data to very expensive, with some survey sources costing thousands of dollars. You can get benchmark data on HR metrics from SHRM, BNA, Saratoga Institute. If you Google it, you'll find a lot. And like I said, the costs range very, very much on that front. So the key takeaway is not so much the metric that you select, because as you saw on the first slide, there are many. It's that you need to select a metric that is meaningful to your organization and should help you make informed business decisions. If you're calculating turnover and doing nothing with it, I would suggest you just stop calculating turnover. But if you're using it to make your business plan for the next year around your employee workforce, it becomes much more powerful. So how can HR metrics help move your business forward? We've explained the correlation between your customers and your employees. You now know the importance of HR metrics, but you might be asking yourself, where do I start? Here is a 3-step, rather simplified process to start looking at HR metrics. I think the first step would be to assess your current situation. What are you doing in HR? What are your reporting mechanisms? What is your HR process? Is anybody using the data? Is it just being calculated and put it on a shelf? Is it not being calculated at all? And have you had conversations with other stakeholders, other department heads, managers, and leaders within the organization? Step 2 would be to evaluate what you're doing. Is it effective? And can you identify any opportunities for improvement? Also, evaluating whether your organization is ready for this or not. Do you have the data you need to even start? Is it that you have to put together systems in order to collect the data in order to analyze the metrics? And then step 3 is really creating a roadmap or a plan. Most important here is clarifying the goals. What do you want to get out of the 5 or 6 metrics that you choose to track, and understand fully why you're tracking them and the connection to the goals. Some of these metrics are going to take some time to calculate. You might not have turnover data right now, so you might actually need a whole year or 6 months to start collecting some of the data in order to calculate some of these metrics. So having said all that, there are still some barriers to adopting analytics. Some people aren't just into it yet. There are some concerns. There is some confusion about who should undertake the analysis. As we pointed out, the data comes from a multiple variety of sources. Finance owns some of it, operations owns some of it, recruitment owns some of it, marketing owns some of it, depending on the metrics you're looking to calculate. And it's my suggestion that it's the person responsible for HR. The answer to that question is that's who owns it. HR should be owning this and working in cross-functional departments to get the data they needed, but HR needs to do that. The data, as we mentioned, exists in silos, and it's sometimes difficult for it to be obtained. But I would suggest, start with information that you have and make a plan for the information that you need. Also, I think one of the barriers is people have trouble starting because they don't have that end goal in sight. They don't have the metric clearly aligned to the business objective, or they don't know what, we want to reduce we want to reduce turnover by X percent, or we want to increase satisfaction by Y%. When you have the goal in mind, it's much easier to track.
So a lot of people in their presentations about HR analytics, they really just want to focus on where are you in regards to the stage of maturity of our analytics. But we feel as though that's speaking over a lot of organizations' head, because a lot of people don't really understand why should they be doing this in the first place and where do you get the value. So let's start from there. At the top, you can see 3 different steps in regards to getting value out of HR analytics. The first step is prepare data, then there's analyze data, and there's make decisions. So you really have to prepare the data in order to make sense of the data. And as Barbara said, if you're going to use HR analytics, or any type of analytics for that matter, you really want to align it with your goals. So it all starts with asking the question, what problems do you want to solve, or what type of information do you want to get out of the data? And then once you figure out what the answer to that is, excuse me, to that question, then you can go back and prepare the data to make sure that you're actually bringing the right data sources together to answer that question. Once you've actually prepared the data and put it into some type of graphs, charts, dashboard, some user-friendly experience where you and the rest of your team can actually use the data and make sense of it to see what's going on, then it's time to start analyzing the data. And when you analyze the data, you really look to see, are there any trends? Are there any outliers? Are there any things that you now found out that you wouldn't have known otherwise without using the data, and what really stands out? And after you analyze it, now it's time for you to make decisions. And none of this is even worth it from the very beginning if you're not looking to make a decision. So let's just say that the data that you were analyzing was around your turnover. And you prepared and took the data from either your payroll system or your HRIS, whatever has the turnover data, or maybe your Excel. You took that data and you looked at the past 3 to 5 years, year over year, to see if your turnover increased or decreased. If it increased over the past 3 to 5 years, you analyze it to see, why do you think it increased? Did employee engagement go down? Did you merge with another company and a lot of people were worried about their job security. Whatever the reason was, now you have some potential things that you can change, and now it's time for you to make action and make decisions. So do you change the culture of the organization so that you can decrease turnover? So does that mean that you need to have somebody to help you with an employee engagement around making the workplace better? Should you start paying people more because too many people were leaving? Whatever that is, you definitely need to make decisions so that all of this work around using the data makes sense. And then after that, it's time for you to ask yourself the question, where are you in regards to the stage of maturity around the data? So we know that most people on the call, because most people in the world with HR analytics are very early, they're not really tracking this. So the biggest bucket of organizations are in the don't track space, which means you might not have a system, you might not have spreadsheets, and you really won't know or have no idea what's going on with your workforce. And then we know a smaller percentage of people are in reporting data stage. And that's really just taking the data, looking at it, not really analyzing it, not making any decisions, but just looking at it and say that you have it. It's great to be in that place if you're starting off today, but you really want to get to a point where you're at least in this bucket where even less people are, which is in the strategic analysis bucket. And this is really looking at the data, making sense of it, figuring out what's going on, and really looking at historical data to see how can you change the future based off of what happened before. And then the smallest bucket of organizations with HR analytics are in the predictive analytics space. And this is where you're taking highly advanced models and algorithms, and maybe someone with a data science background or a modeling background is taking data from different systems, and they're figuring out how can they predict the future based off of historical trends. So if your turnover rate was X% over the past 3 to 5 years, then if you stayed on this trend, then you would actually be at X% over the next 3 to 5 years, and using some type of calculation to find that out. But regardless of where you are, it's not too late for you to move from one stage to the next so that you can continue to get more value out of your data.
So in addition to the three-step process that we outlined in reference to HR metrics and analytics, here at PROXUS, we work with our clients to assess, evaluate, and create a plan for HR metrics. Many of you on the call are our iSolve customers. Thank you. And your iSolve product does provide HR metrics, and we will be having several lunch and learn sessions that you'll learn more about. And really what we do is we meet you at your current stage in the journey, and we partner with you to ensure that you are using HR metrics to achieve your business goals.
And for us at Employee Cycle, we are a workforce analytics dashboard for healthcare providers, for all the healthcare providers on the call. And what we wanted to do is just show you a quick example of what a dashboard would look like, where you bring all the data from all those systems that we showed earlier or from all of your manual data sources, put it into one place so that you can have one source of truth to understand everything that's going on with your HR data. So whether you're using a system like iSolve or PROXUS iSolve, or a system like Employee Cycle, if you are in the healthcare space, regardless, you should use some type of dashboarding software or system so that you can really figure out what's going on in the quickest way possible. So we hope you are still awake and that you were taking notes and enjoyed what we just spoke about for the past half an hour. So we're just going to do a quick recap for the takeaways and highlights of our presentation. So we really wanted to talk with you and hone in about the similarities between employees and customers and how you can take a lot of the things that you're already doing with your customers and implement that into your workforce. We then spoke about why HR analytics are very important. We spoke about how HR data comes from various systems and manual sources, and depending on where you are in your organization and how many systems you have, you still can perform this type of analytics and data-driven decision-making, whether it's from a system or a manual source. We spoke about that there are many different HR metrics, and they come in all different types of forms, and they focus on all different types of problems, but it really just comes down to what's the biggest challenge, and that would dictate exactly what sources, what metrics you should be using. And most importantly, we really wanted to hone in, if you don't remember anything else, that understanding your workforce is understanding your business, which means if you don't understand your people and the people who actually make the work happen and make the company run, then you don't really understand your business. And we just wanted to hone in on that, and hopefully this presentation will help you make sure that you're putting as much focus on your workforce as you are on your customers. So we wanted to thank you very much for sitting in and listening in on this presentation. I am Bruce Marable, and we are also here with Barbara O'Shea. Our contact information is on this slide if you want to reach out to us directly.